I've always dreamt about becoming a dad. I know the little moments like teaching them their ABCs, running them to soccer practice, or helping them pick out their prom outfits are going to bring me a whole lot of joy. I'm also ready for the challenging moments like sleepless nights, preteen outbursts, and difficult growing up conversations. One thing that I'm not quite sure I'm ready for: the cost of children. I was reading a survey, and apparently the average cost of raising a child from 0 to 18 years old in the United States is $237,000. And I'm not even quite sure I would be on the low end of that average. I do agree with Maya Corbic, our guest for today's episode, that you can't put a price on love that you'll have for your children. But the financial impact has to at least be considered in your decision-making process. How much does a pregnancy cost? What financial milestones should I accomplish before having a child? Can I realistically afford to take care of a child right now? These are all questions that will be answered in today's episode. As I mentioned, we'll be talking to Maya Corbic. She is the creator behind the popular Instagram page teach.kids.money, where she is helping parents raise financially savvy children. She is also the author of From Piggy Bank to Stocks, the ultimate guide for a young investor, where she introduces children and honestly parents to the exciting world of investing. This is a great episode for anyone considering parenthood or also soon-to-be parents, as we discuss a lot of early childhood cost-saving tips. Let's get into it. I hope you enjoy my conversation with the first-gen immigrant, CPA, and energetic mom of two, Maya Corbic. You know those moments where you think, I wish I would have learned this in school? Those are the topics that we love to talk about. Join me each week as I interview experts sharing their strategies for solving problems that us young adults will face throughout our 20s and 30s. So what are you waiting for? If you want new episodes about adulting advice every Monday, hit that follow button. So Maya, I'm excited to have you on the podcast. We are going to explore a topic that maybe we've touched on this topic a little bit, but I don't know if we've ever flushed it out as much as I think we're going to flush this topic out today. And that is the cost of having children. We have a lot of listeners that are either very young parents or considering parenthood right now. And I was reading some stats before this. It's no surprise here in America that a lot of people are delaying or even foregoing having children. And I think there could be a lot of different reasons for that, but a major one that's cited is the financial impact of child-related costs. People just can't afford to have kids anymore. This article that I was reading, it stated that raising a child from birth to the age of 18 now costs on average $237,000 in the United States, which is just like an insane amount of money for some people. Most people, I'm pretty sure the average 401k balance is less than that. So you spend more on kids than you do on your, saving for your own retirement. Have you read any similar surveys? And then through your own just personal experience, do you find this number to be relatively true?
Yeah, and I think we must have read the same survey because I read that one as well. And I also read some other ones that actually suggest that number can even be higher depending on the family income. So this other study that I read basically said that the higher the family income, the more money they feel pressure to spend on their kids because, they are maybe living in a certain neighborhood where everybody's kids go to certain activities. So it's that whole keeping with Jonas's, effect. Because of course you want the best for your children, right? Like you see all these other kids doing these amazing activities. You want that for your kids too. And then I was reading that also depending on where you live, whether you live in urban or rural areas, that can impact the cost of the child, of your children as well, because you have to pay for food and accommodation. And both of those are more expensive in the urban areas.
Yeah, I definitely think, of course, this is a generalized number, and raising kids in San Diego versus raising kids in the middle of Arkansas probably have a little bit different cost factor involved, but, food, childcare, clothing, housing, all of that. But it's these other things that you're talking about as well that we don't even think about, extracurricular activities, advanced schooling, family vacations, stuff like that really adds up. And I can understand and kind of see why people are hesitant on bringing kids into their own family, especially 20-somethings who are kind of already struggling with student loan debt and trying to save for their own house and all of the other pressures of keeping up with the Joneses as well. So it's no surprise. With that in mind, do you feel like there's any financial milestones that 20-somethings should consider hitting before they really become parents? And I feel like that's probably a loaded question, but curious to know your response on this.
Well, I definitely think that it would be so much easier as somebody who decides to become a parent has their debt paid off, or at least under control, or has a debt repayment plan, so that that's just one less thing to worry about. I would say another financial milestone would be figuring out your housing. It doesn't have to be, I don't really believe that everybody should own a house. I mean, we bought our first home before we had kids, but it was affordable back then. And I'm talking like this was 20 years ago. And, costs of real estate were a lot cheaper. And so it made sense. But whether that's a home or you're deciding to rent, it just needs to make financial sense. And you really need to, again, have a plan. If you want to have kids, it's kind of like, okay, I'm going to rent. This is approximately what that's going to cost each year. And then also there's usually, like a set percentage by how much this rent can approximately increase. So you can do some projections and then see, what that cost is going to be like when you have kids. Another thing to keep in mind is that once you have children, as they get older, they may require their own bedroom, right? So now you're expanding. Your housing cost is a lot higher than it used to be. So that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah, I like your initial thought there with at least getting control of debt, especially high interest rate debt, carrying credit card debt, maybe even student loans to an extent. It might be worth delaying childcare cost in order for you and your partner to continue to kind of chip away on that, because bringing somebody else into the family, of course, is got to just add to some of the reoccurring expenses. And if you're already struggling to keep up with some of these ongoing credit expenses that you have, like your mortgage costs, your student loans, your credit card debt, then there might be some consideration there that maybe you're not quite financially ready to have kids. What about family finance items to prep for before like a child arrives? Like I'm guessing life insurance should probably be now considered since somebody else is depending on you, like a child, and maybe even putting together a will.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And actually, I just want to mention before that, just to your point about, chipping away at debt. When you're young and you don't have children, it's so much easier to have side hustles. So I know people are struggling and I know life is busy and I know you're young and you want to enjoy your life, but maybe there's a hobby that you do that you could turn into a side hustle to actually earn that extra income to chip away at that debt. Because I can tell you that once you have kids, that time, that free time is just, I wouldn't say it's completely gone, but especially at the beginning, it really is, because they're so tiny and they really, really need you. And there will be less time for things like side hustles. So that's just one thing that I would suggest, that, if you're thinking of actually putting in some extra income, whether it's into your investing accounts or chipping away at debt, then do that. But in terms of these other things, for sure, like creating a will. And I really believe that whether you have kids or not, you should have a will, because my understanding is, that I'm not a lawyer, but by speaking with a lot of lawyers, and I've interviewed them for my Instagram account, a lot of them say that if you don't have a will, your estate ends up it's not as easily distributed to your loved ones. Like it actually goes through the probate. So it goes through the courts, and there is, it could be, the whole process can be held up. It's just better to, like, if you don't have a plan, the state has a plan for your belongings, right? So you actually want to have a will regardless of whether or not you have kids. And again, same thing with life insurance too. If you have somebody in your life who cares about you and depends on you, I suggest that you get a life insurance. Even if you have pets, you want those pets taken care of. And you want to have a plan for, God forbid something happens to you, that, these pets will go somewhere. Somebody will take care of them. There will be money for them to be taken care of. I would also suggest that, for parents, future parents, to research childcare expenses. Because again, like that article that we both read, I think it talked about differences in expenses from different states. I believe Hawaii was the most expensive primarily because the food and accommodation was really expensive. And the south of the United States was a little bit cheaper. So you need to like really understand, okay, how much are things going to cost? Understand your parental leave benefits. Talk to your employer or HR and understand what those are. You may also want to open up an investment account for your child, and we can explore that a little bit further. But you can even open up 529 account for yourself right now as a beneficiary. And then once you actually have a child, you can change the beneficiary from you onto your child. So you can start investing into that 529 account right now and build it up because, the time is in your favor and you want to take advantage of the long time horizon that you have ahead. So it's the time and the compound interest that do the heavy lifting of the wealth creation. You want to understand the tax benefits that you will qualify for, like once you have kids, because there are some tax benefits. If you have friends that already have children, usually they will have hand-me-downs that they will want to get rid of and declutter their homes. So don't be too proud, accept those, because especially when you have babies, they will go through clothes really, really quickly because they're growing quickly, right? Like every month or so, you're buying new clothes, right? So those hand-me-downs can be great.
I remember my shoes, like all through my childhood. It was like every year on my birthday, it's like, you might as well get me new shoes. And it's like, because I'm growing up a size, maybe I already ran through them, and maybe it was because I'm like, they're too small for me now, but the amount of shoes my parents had to buy just because my foot simply grew is craziness to me compared to now. I like buy a shoe and I'm like, okay, if I take care of this, like I could have this for a long time. Then it was like, I might have this for the next 6 months. I have no idea. You also mentioned, well, there's a lot of things I want to double back to. I'll pause on 529s because I think we're going to open up a pretty big conversation about that near the end of this conversation. But I do want to talk about cost saving strategies, and especially early on, because I'm guessing a lot of the cost of having a child might be front loaded. I don't know if I entirely agree with that, because I'm guessing there are a lot of things later on in life too that cost a lot more money. But I'm imagining pregnancy for sure, but also all of the early costs you have to absorb with raising a child, the car seats and the clothes that they go through and the toys and all of that things. How do you even go about estimating some of that cost, especially like the pregnancy things and some of these early costs? Like for me, I don't even know if I would know how much money do I need to save for? Like if I want to prep for having a kid, like how much should I save for? And how do I actually like realistically think through like, oh, a pregnancy's got to cost this, and all of these other random things that I never thought about are also got to cost this amount. Do you remember early on what you did, or did you just kind of charge on and pay for things as they came?
To be honest, I think we just did that. We were a little bit like I would say we were young and stupid probably, and just had more luck than anything. But, one thing that I would suggest that everybody does also is check their medical insurance and understand how would that impact their financial position. And also remember to change their medical insurance when that child is born, right? So that medical insurance can help pay for some of those expenses, especially the costs of, the pregnancy doctor visits and things like that. And it's really hard to estimate how much things will cost, but that's the reason why they have baby showers, right? And when you have that baby shower, the idea is that everybody will pitch in and try to help and, pay for some of the big things that you need. Maybe, you'll have a group of friends, like instead of one friend buying you a stroller, which can be really expensive, maybe you're going to have 5 friends pitch in and buy you a stroller. And the idea is that it kind of goes around, right? This time, your friends did it for you. Next time, you will all do it for another friend. And then after that, you're going to do it for another friend. And it just really, really helps that way. So, you can really spend a lot of money. And it's like you have Fiats of strollers and you have BMWs of strollers. Like, which one do you want, right? And of course, because it's your baby, you want the best one, right? Like,
Definitely.
My husband, and I am very, very price conscious. And my husband has a story when we were shopping for bedding for our son. And I wanted this special bedding from Pottery Barn. And he said I looked possessed because they did not have it anymore. And I was determined that I was going to have it. So I made him go to every different Pottery Barn. Because, internet wasn't what it is now, that where you could just check on your phone who has this in their supply. And it was Pottery Barn. It was so expensive too. I don't know what I was thinking, but I was like, it's our first child. Our child has to have the best stuff, right? You're hormonal and you just have to kind of keep things in check and be like, okay, how about Toys R Us bedding? It's going to do just fine. It's 100% cotton. It's not the best cotton, Egyptian cotton, like the one that Pottery Barn carries, but my baby will be fine, right? So again, there are some things that you can buy secondhand. I wouldn't recommend doing that for, let's say, car seats, because car seats, they say that if they've ever been in a car accident, you don't know if if they go into the second car accident, you don't know if they're going to perform as well as they should. So car seats, I would definitely recommend buying new. But then again, you've got BMWs of car seats. And again, this was another one where I was like, we have to have the best because it's safety, right? So, okay, for that one, probably you should have the best you possibly can afford, right? And maybe this is something you can put on your baby shower. But it's really hard to determine how much things would cost. So I would say, there are Goodwills. There are a lot of these places where they actually sell secondhand things for kids that you can buy ahead of time. And, you can buy the crib that's secondhand, but you can just buy a brand new mattress, right? Mm-hmm. Because you don't want your baby sleeping on a mattress where somebody else has slept, which is okay too. It's nothing against that. You disinfect it, you put the mattress protector on it, and it's fine. I always like to think about, because I come from Bosnia, and, I always like to think about developing world and what people have to do to raise kids over there. I mean, some of these kids, they sleep on dirt floors, so my child sleeping on a used mattress that was disinfected and has a mattress protector on it. Well, you know what? It's not such a big deal. Let's be honest, right? So, but it's hard. It's really hard when you're hormonal and you just want the best for your kid.
That's totally fair. And I totally see that. So my brother and I, we side hustle and do some flipping on Facebook Marketplace. And honestly, the things that are always the best are child items. Because they're insanely expensive new, and parents that can't afford it typically go secondhand to buy some of these things. And then B, parents will usually spend on their child before they spend on themselves, and they'll go out there and they'll get the things that they need in order to make sure their child's okay. So we very rarely struggle with reselling childcare stuff, and yeah, it's really interesting, and I like it because it's usually a win-win because I can help somebody find something that's way more affordable than what they would buy new, which sometimes can be insanely expensive. But I also liked your idea on just asking some of your friends who may be further along in their journey if they have any hand-me-downs that they can offer you. Because especially clothes, holy cow, the amount of, I grew up, my mom babysits, so 0 through 5s, I'm very, very comfortable and common with them. I've had 100 of them come through my life because my mom always babysat and they were always around. And their clothes by the end of every day, it was just disgusting, either because they were playing or they threw up on their clothes or whatever. For me, especially at that age, I probably wouldn't give as much consideration to clothes. Maybe a nice outfit here and there if I'm bringing my child out, but if not, they're getting the hand-me-down clothes.
Yeah, and they grow out of it so quickly that it's, you're replacing that in a couple of months.
Yeah. Any other tips on kind of how to stretch a dollar, especially for young parents and some of the things that, they're going to have to pay for? Do you have any childcare tips by chance? Because I know that's a huge mega bomb that's out there that is really hard to plan for.
Yeah, the childcare, I obviously, if you can afford to have one parent stay at home, that's the best, I guess. Or, actually, I shouldn't say that. I'm going to scratch that because I could have afforded to stay at home, but I really needed. I'm one of those people. I love my kids, but I also need to be out there working. I'm just not really good at stay-at-home mom. But in terms of childcare, people do different kinds of things. If you have parents who are retired who can help out, that's a blessing. That really is a blessing because that they will take care of your child very well. I've also had a lot of friends that have hired Filipino nannies. Those are really popular here in Canada. I'm not sure how they are in the States. It's funny, actually, a lot of us, we have this psychological hang-ups, some psychological hang-ups, like how we were brought up. So I just remember that, like, when I was growing up, my mom worked and I was in daycare. And so to me, that was the only way to bring up kids. But really, like, once I've had my children and I've seen how other people have raised their children, there are many different ways how you can successfully raise your kids, right? So some of them is like a mom can be at home. I have some friends that were stay-at-home moms and they've done a wonderful job raising their kids. And that really worked for them because they didn't have to pay for childcare and they were able to manage their household budget, and they overall saved so much money for that family. I've seen friends who engaged their retired parents. His parents were retired, her parents were retired, so they kind of split up the week. So, one set of grandparents was babysitting 2 days a week. Another set of grandparents was babysitting 3 days a week. I also have friends who've done Filipino nanny thing, and they literally had a house with a basement that was unused. And so the Filipino nanny was living there. And like they had a contract where she was like, actually, when she was not watching the kids, she would clean and cook for the family. And she would get to stay there. So she had paid room and board. And her food was paid for. And I think they paid her, I forget how much they paid her, but it was very, very economical. And I mean, this was some 16 years ago, so I don't know if things have changed, but we have a lot of Filipino nannies here, and a lot of them come from Philippines to do this kind of work.
Yeah.
So that also works out a lot better, apparently, than, or a lot cheaper than having your child in daycare.
Yeah, I think the live-in nanny situations are becoming even popular with people that want to expat somewhere, or they, I've had a friend that was a live-in nanny in Australia. She's from the States. She just wanted to live in Australia for a little bit. She worked out a deal with the family there as a live-in nanny, and it was great. She got to experience the country, and she made some money and didn't really spend a whole lot because she was a live-in nanny. She had her room and board paid for there. They paid for her meals too. And she got to go on like a bunch of cool excursions because when the family traveled on family vacations, they would bring her along. And she was kind of built there as a babysitter or a nanny whenever the parents wanted to go run out and do things during vacation. But oftentimes too, they would spend time with their family, and she got to go hang out and see a new city in Australia. So I think it's becoming pretty popular in the travel hacking community as well.
Oh, that's very interesting. Yeah, I did not know that. I only know of Filipino nannies just because around me, everybody had Filipino nannies. And I know that they actually there are organizations that only hire Filipino nannies. And then these ladies, I know they work in Canada, so I'm assuming that they would probably be working in the US as well.
Yeah. So what about the benefits of children? We talked a little bit about some of the tax credits, and you mentioned that. And I know we can't really get too deep into that because it's so personal for everybody. Everyone's unique situation, depending on where they live, kind of depends on some of the unique credits. But just from the onset, definitely go look or talk to your accountant or your tax advisor on what it looks like from a tax benefit standpoint whenever bringing a kid in here. But there are a lot of like cool investment accounts that get unlocked whenever you have a kid. And we have a community that's all about investing. This is a really engaged community. So I know they're going to be really engaged about investing for their child as well. One popular one you brought up is the 529. Can you talk just high level on what a 529 is and kind of any other accounts that maybe someone should consider doing a little bit further research in case they are thinking about investing for their child's future?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So 529 plan is, as many of you know, it's an educational savings plan or investing plan. And as I said, like a lot of people in the financial literacy space that don't have kids yet, I know they have opened one up. So essentially, when you open it up, you are the custodian for it, and then you choose your own beneficiary. A lot of them that have opened this account and yet they don't have kids, they have chosen themselves as the beneficiary. So when their child is born, they will change themselves from the account beneficiary from themselves to their child. I think the beautiful thing is like, even if your child does not go to let's say college, if you have more than one child, you can always change the beneficiary to your second child, or you can change it back to yourself or your grandkids. But recently a new law was passed that a certain amount of money that is accumulated in that account over a long period of time can also be transferred into a child's Roth IRA if they decide not to go to college, which is really beneficial because a lot of people were not investing in this account because they were worried that their child will not be going to college. So they just thought that money was lost, right? So the money is not lost. It can be transferred into their Roth IRA, which is fantastic. And the Roth IRA or custodial Roth IRA would be another account that you could open up for your kid. So if you have a side hustle or if you have a business, essentially like you can start, investing into this account on behalf of your child from a very young age. The key with this account is that money that's invested has to be earned by the child. So a lot of times this account is not used until the kids are teenagers and they start working, and then they start investing their money into that account. But the reason why I said, if you have a side hustle, if you have a business, you can start using it earlier is because a lot of business owners, they hire their child to work for them and they pay them a fair wage, and then they invest that money into custodial Roth IRAs. So what I mean by hiring your child, even if they're a baby and let's say you have a business, you can hire your child to model for your business. Yeah. They can do promotions for you. You can put them up on an ad, like their picture on an ad. And there's actually a proper way to do this. So again, like this is something to discuss with your tax accountant because you have to write up a job description. You have to keep track of the hours that they're working. You have to comply with the child labor laws in the state that you live in. And you have to, pay them whatever the fair wage is for that job. And it can actually serve as a tax saving strategy for your business too, because whatever it is that you pay to your child, you can deduct from your business as an expense, which makes your income a lot lower and you're paying less tax. But if you pay your child just a bare minimum, like the minimum that's non-taxable, and then they are not paying taxes. Now they're investing this money very early. They have all this like long time horizon ahead of them, and they keep doing this year after year after year. And they can become millionaires a lot quicker than they would have if they, had they started investing into this account later. So I absolutely love custodial Roth IRAs. I wish we had them in Canada. We don't. And I feel like I need to lobby the government to do this. But it's, if you have a business and you have kids, this is probably my favorite account.
Yeah. That's what we're here for. These are the fun little money hacks. Even as like a non-parent, these are the things that I love to geek out and learn a ton about. I remember I was doing an episode, it was a while back, probably 50 episodes ago. I think it was episode 49, so maybe even more than that. I did a student loan episode, and I got to like deep dive and learn a ton about student loans, and it was like so much fun. This is the personal finance geek that's coming out in me. This is another area that I'm thinking about as soon as I rip off the Band-Aid and probably have a whole episode all about custodial IRAs for your child. Like, this is going to be something I just enjoy doing a ton of deep research on. But I like that. So 529s, custodial accounts, those are two places. If you're thinking about investing for your child, go do some more research on those. Is that pretty fair to assume?
Yeah, and then there's UTMA. You can also invest your money on behalf of your child into UTMA. I mean, even if you have nieces or nephews, you can set them up. Let's say if you want to do something nice for them, instead of just giving them toys, you can actually invest money. You can open up this account for them as beneficiary, and you are custodial for this account. And when they become of age, so sometimes that's between ages of 18 or 21, depending on the state that they live in, then they would take the ownership of that account. And then they would hopefully do something smart with that money rather than just spend it, right?
Fair. Maya, as we're closing out this conversation, I want to end on one other point. And I mean, your mission is all about helping parents teach their children about money. And you want to make sure that every child has access to financial literacy. And usually that does start at the household, and it starts from the parents wanting to be really engaged and help teach their kid about money, especially early on, and also demonstrate the right actions in that. But I've heard you mention multiple times that before parents start teaching their kids about money, they need to independently discuss their family values. So the partners need to come together and really decide and give some thought to what are their family values, because a lot of that translates into what teaching your kids about money is actually got to look like. So can you kind of talk through like what does that realistically look like to discuss your family values, and how would that apply to a decision like giving your kids allowance, to give your kids allowance or to not give your kids allowance?
Yeah, so I always talk about there are certain basic steps that we need to take before teaching kids about money. And even before the values, I think the big one is to reflect upon our own money mindset that we grew up with. And a lot of times, we're not even aware of what our money mindset is. So it's really important to understand that, because we can inadvertently pass that on to our children. And, sometimes, for example, for me, because I'm the first generation immigrant, I struggled. My family lived in government shelters and housing. My first inclination is to just preserve the money, not spend it, and I don't want to pass that mindset of scarcity onto my kids. So I have to be very mindful and very careful what I say to my children. And so a lot of times I suggest for parents to think about their own childhood and growing up. Like, what did they see with respect of money when they were growing up? What did they hear about money when they were growing up? What did they feel? What kind of emotions did they feel about money when they were growing up? Did they feel, did their parents argue about money? Because sometimes they can associate money with strife, and they may not want to discuss money with their partner or even with their child as the child is growing up. And I firmly believe that money should not be taboo, that we really need to be talking about it openly. So those are all the things to be aware of. And I feel like even for me, and I've been doing this for over a decade, I'm still struggling with some of these things. And I have to be very careful what I say in front of my children. And sometimes I will say things and then, I will follow up with them and be like, oh, you know what? Maybe that wasn't the best decision. This is maybe how I should have done things, right? But once we look at our own money mindset, then we can come together as a couple and really talk about, okay, what is important to each of us that we want to teach our kids about money? And maybe one of the exercises that I do in some of my workshops is to have parents kind of go into opposite corners for 5 minutes and write down, let's say, different values that are important to them and why they're important. And I actually have this workbook, which is part of my online course. So essentially what they do is like they go away for 5 minutes, they fill out this workbook, and then they come together and they compare their answers. And usually where they disagree, those are the the golden points that they should be, discussing. And this is where they need to come to an agreement so that they can, together be on the same page when it comes to teaching their kids about money. So when it comes to values, maybe one parent is very much about, giving and donating, and the other partner is just like, it's okay. It's not my number one goal. Like, I don't really care whether or not we teach our kids about that, but I just want to make sure that we teach them about wealth preservation, and that they grow their wealth, and, there's eventually generational wealth transfer onto our grandkids, right? That's more important to me than donating money. So it's about having these conversations, because as a parent, your kids can sense when you're not on the same page, and they will use one parent against another. So you have to be very, very careful when it comes to that.
And Maya, this was enlightening conversation. I don't know if I feel better about potentially having kids or feel worse. I know it's got to be expensive, but I know there are lots of ways to minimize those expenses, but also the joy that you can get from passing along such like important financial wisdom and insights and values to your kids is really cool and amazing. I even see it in my own family and my girlfriend's family too. Both of our grandparents grew up very, very poor, and I could tell how that kind of shaped our own parents, but our parents did the best they could, and they also really set us up for success. My dad was so open and honest about money conversations. He never really taught us about investing. I don't think that was really his forte, but he always taught us about saving and paying yourself first and taking care of your financial assets and, wealth accumulation and working hard to get money and make money. So it's really cool things like that he passed along to me. And then kind of like you talked about, there's some other things like scarcity mindset that I'm working to kind of work through right now and to not pass along to the next generation that I have. But this is just a kind of a fun thing to think about and to move from student to teacher one day. And in terms of money is a really cool thought.
Yeah. And I just want to add one other thing, which I did not mention, but I think this may be helpful. It's really also important to look into free programs. There are a lot of libraries out there and non-for-profit organizations that have tons of free programs for kids, free books. And, you can actually save a lot of money by utilizing those free programs. And there are also a lot of the free online programs as well. I know that people nowadays after COVID, a lot of them would prefer in person, but there's just a lot out there that you could be doing and you don't have to spend a lot of money. And I guess lastly, I just want to leave everybody with, I remember when we were deciding whether or not we're going to have our third child, and we ended up with two only. And it wasn't because of the cost. It was just more that it was hard, right? Like we had kids our kids are 21 months apart. And I just remember actually for the third child, I did put down on paper a lot of things. And I was like, how much is it going to cost? And all this and that. And I remember thinking also about how the world is really made for a family of four, because the third child, let's say we like to travel a lot. And so we would always have to book an extra room for, if we traveled, if it was five of us, or a bigger car, and so there were all these things. And I said to my husband, I remember turning to him, I said, well, by looking at this, there's more negatives than positive. I'm like, the only positive is this is a living human being that I know we're going to love with our hearts, and no money can ever make up for the love that we're going to get, right? And when I think of my two children, I have spent so much money on them, and so many times I would buy them things that I would never buy myself. And even to this day, we spend way more money on our kids than we do on ourselves. But the love that you get and the joy, and I don't know, we're just living through them, every success. They're literally, I think they're just coming from school right now, and I can't wait to go downstairs and talk to them about their day. And I mean, money is just a side thing. If you want kids, they're totally worth it. Money, I don't know, it's going to come. You're going to figure it out. But yeah, they're worth it. They can be pain. It's hard and they will drive you nuts sometimes, but they're just I would say one of the best things that have happened to both of us, to me and my husband.
That's cool. Yeah. Mic drop moment there. So folks, if you want to go check out Maya, she's got a very active Instagram page where she shares a lot of advice and wisdom to parents and children about raising financially savvy kids. And that's teach.kids.money. Once again, that's teach.kids.money. And Maya, you also have a new book that's out as well. You want to share a little bit about the book and where people can find it?
Yeah, sure. So the book is called From Piggy Banks to Stocks, The Ultimate Guide for a Young Investor. So it is a great stocking stuffer, or I don't know when this will be published, but it's a great gift for any nieces or nephews that you have. But also, it's a great book for anybody who wants to learn basics of investing, because when I was actually writing this book, I had some testers. Those were the families, so parents and children that were going through the book. And it was actually the parents that were getting back to me with feedback, how happy they were to read that book and feel less intimidated by investing. So if you're looking for one of those books that is kind of from the Dummy series, but just super friendly, very colorful, that explains complex investment topics like dividends and capital gains and whatnot, in a language that a 10-year-old can understand, this is also a great book for adults as well.
That's awesome. And we'll have links to the show notes, assuming they can find that on Amazon. Is that correct?
Yes, it's on Amazon and any other major bookstore online.
Cool. My final question for you. If you had the opportunity to teach a 16-week class to a group of graduating college seniors on a topic that isn't covered in the classroom, what would you teach and how would you teach it?
Oh my goodness. I would definitely teach the basics of financial literacy, starting with what your dad taught you, paying yourself first, taking care of your assets. I feel like this is one thing that we should be teaching all of our graduating college classes. I have friends who are doctors and dentists, and they say to me that this is one class that they wish they took in college and they never did. And, they're struggling. These are smart people, and yet they're having very hard time with their finances.
Yeah. Without getting on a soapbox, just the lack of personal finance curriculum compared to the importance that it has on our lives kind of post-education is just absurd to me. So yes, I think that'd be a very, very useful class. So once again, Maya Corbic. Maya, this was such a blast. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy that we did this.
Thanks for listening to the episode. As always, I appreciate your kind words. If you want to leave us a rating and review on your podcast player right now, that would absolutely make my day. If you want to find episode show notes, our blog, and other great resources, head over to tsirpodcast.com. If you have follow-up questions, an idea for a future episode, or just want to say hi, we have a contact form on our website, and those messages go straight into my inbox, and I promise you, I will reply. But all right, guys, I really appreciate you tuning in. I love you all, and you're not alone. Let's keep making it through our struggles together.